Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm finally going to share with you my secrets to the smallest 3-tier cake I've ever made. I'm making a chocolate cake with 3 different fillings in each tier, but you can make it in any flavor using the same technique that I'm going to teach you now. You can leave it as it is or garnish it with the toppings of your choice. You can even make it in the same flavor like I did for this one. This is entirely Nutella. This was my first 3-tier cake. It is black forest flavor, and for this I've used my unicorn Chocochips. And just look at how tiny this cake is, barely the size of my hand. The cake looks so pretty. Let's get started right away. I am using my chocolate sponge in 3 different sizes. This is 5.5 inch, 4.5 inch and 3.5 inch. You can use any 3 smallest consecutive sizes available to you. Now for the frosting, I am using chocolate ganache, but you can use any frosting of your choice. To soak my cakes, I don't use sugar syrup anymore, but instead I use milk with 1 teaspoon of ganache added. A cake board, obviously, a skewer to support it, Lotus Biscoff spread and cookies for the topmost layer, Nutella and roasted hazelnuts for the second layer, and Chocochips for the bottom layer. We'll start with the biggest sponge, which will become our bottom layer. I've applied some ganache on the board so that the sponge sticks and the cake doesn't move. I've divided my sponge into 2 equal layers. I'm going to soak it with some chocolate milk. You can use sugar syrup also, it's perfectly fine. Now soaking the cake is optional, but it ensures that the cake remains moist even after it is refrigerated, so I would highly suggest it. I'm using a dollop of ganache and I'm going to spread it with an offset spatula. You can use a spoon or a butter knife also. Spread it smoothly and evenly so that the cake remains nice and even. I'm going to add some chocolate chips. You can also add roasted nuts. Now I'm going to place my second layer on top. Notice I've placed it upside down so that the dome part is inside and my cake is nice and even on the top. I'm going to start frosting the edges first so that if there's any gap or any differences in height, it can be covered with the ganache. I'm applying a very thin layer of ganache to the cake, and this is called the crumb coat. If you're in a hurry, you can frost your cake directly with a thicker layer of ganache, but crumb coat ensures a neater look. You don't need to spend a lot of time on this, just make sure it is covered entirely. Then clean your board and refrigerate the cake for half an hour, and until then we can get on to our other layers. The method remains the same. The only difference is that I haven't applied any ganache to the board this time because I ultimately want to remove the cake from the board. I don't want it to stick. I've applied the ganache and I'm adding some Nutella and roasted hazelnut to it. Nutella with chocolate cake is a classic combination and you can never go wrong with this. But the flavor is completely up to you. You can use anything you want in all the 3 layers. I'm adding some chopped roasted hazelnuts for the texture. Make sure you add more Nutella or even ganache over the hazelnut so that the second layer that we put on top sticks to the cake and doesn't fall off while we cut in. Press it lightly after placing it on top and crumb coat it like we did for the previous layer. Refrigerate it and start working on the topmost layer. For this, I'm using Biscoff spread and Biscoff cookies. I microwave the spread for 10 to 15 seconds so that it becomes thinner and can be easily applied. You can do the same for Nutella if it's too thick. Now I'm adding crushed Biscoff cookies. They add a lovely texture and crunch to the cake, and this flavor is absolutely yummy. If you haven't tried this flavor yet, I would highly suggest you do that because I honestly fell in love with this. So crumb coating the topmost layer and refrigerating it. Now it's time for the final coat, and we'll start with the bottom layer first. I always microwave my ganache a little so that it's softer and easily pliable because the cake is cold and the ganache will set really fast when you apply it. So make sure you work fast and your ganache is soft. In the same way, apply ganache all over the sides also, and I'm using a cake comb to make some texture on the sides. All you need to do is simply hold the comb at a 45-degree angle to your cake and rotate your turntable. Once you're happy with the texture, use a scraper or an offset spatula to bring in all that excess ganache from the edges and make it smooth. The recipes to my eggless chocolate sponge and my 2-ingredient ganache are already up on the channel, and the links are given in the description below. You can check them out. Now there are 2 ways to move forward with this. You can either give all the 3 layers a final coat, chill them nicely and then stack them on top of each other like I'm doing here. I've chilled my cakes completely. The ganache is firm, it doesn't stick to my hand. I'm using offset spatulas to lift it up and carefully placing it on the bottom layer. But I honestly don't prefer this method anymore. I used to do it, but not anymore because I found a better method. Now since the ganache is extremely chilled, lifting it from the board makes it really a messy and uneven, and it creates a really messy rim at the division of each tier, and it doesn't look good at all. So in order to avoid that, what you can do is work with the crumb coated layers. Once the bottom layer is final coated, I'll place the crumb coated middle layer on top of it, and since the layer is extremely chilled and the ganache is set, I can adjust the placement also. Once it's in the center, press it gently and make sure your ganache is fresh on the bottom layer so that the middle layer sticks to it. Now I'm final coating the middle layer after stacking it on top of the bottom layer. Now I prefer this method over the previous one because the ganache is still fresh even on the bottom layer, so even if I mess it up, I can fix it right away. I love working with ganache, but this method works perfectly well for whipped cream also. So just like we did before, I've covered the sides with ganache and I'm using a cake comb to make the texture. I preferred the textured look, but you can keep it simple and plain also. Once you're happy with the texture, smoothen out the cake using an offset spatula by bringing in all that excess ganache from the edges towards the center. This method takes a lot less time than the previous one. You only need time for chilling the crumb coat, that's it. And as I told you, I didn't apply any ganache on the bottom of the cake so that I can easily lift it up. The ganache is firm, I can lift it up and place it anywhere. Now before coating the top tier with the final layer, there's one important step. You need to put a center dowel in. Because the cake is very small, it doesn't need doweling at every step, but it needs a center dowel. So I'm using a plastic straw. You can trim it to the size of your cake so that it goes to the bottom of the cake and also doesn't peek out from the top. And now we can start doing the final coat of the topmost tier. This center dowel is also not necessary, but I do it like just in case. It prevents the layers from sliding off. Now we'll frost it in the same way as we did for the other two layers. We'll bring in the edges, like we'll put the texture, we'll bring in the edges, we'll smoothen it out, blah blah blah. Our cake looks pretty, and now it's time for my favorite part, the drips. I'm using different drips for each tier, and for the bottommost layer I'm using a simple chocolate ganache. I melted it and added a teaspoon of milk. You can add more according to the consistency. You don't want it too thin, but just flowy enough. I'm using a butter paper cone to make my drips. You can use a disposable piping bag or even a squeezy bottle. Now place your cone just on the edge and apply a little pressure so that the ganache comes out. You don't want overflowing ganache or overflowing drips. I absolutely hate that, but like if it's up to you. If you want, you can do that, but I don't like to do that, so my drips will be consistent. You can do uneven drips also, whatever you like. Once the drips are done, put some ganache on the top of the bottom tier also and use a spoon to smoothen it out, just like I did. It will conceal all your messy divisions at the center. So our second tier is Nutella, so we'll obviously do a Nutella drip. To thin out the Nutella, I'm adding a little bit, very little, refined oil or vegetable oil. Very little, not too much. And you can also heat the Nutella in the microwave. And in the same way like we did for the ganache, we'll be doing the drips for the second tier all over. And we'll also put some Nutella on the top of the middle layer as well to conceal those messy divisions. I didn't heat the Nutella for this one, so it's not flowing down as I wanted to. So I would suggest you heat it for about 10 to 15 seconds to get the perfect Nutella drip. And for the top tier, we're doing a Biscoff drip. I microwaved it for 10 to 15 seconds to get the flowy consistency. You do not need to add anything to this, and it flows off beautifully. Just like we did the other two drips, we'll drip it all over, and then I'll put some Biscoff in the center, and I'll use my palette knife or the back of the spoon to create a pattern in the center on the top. Just hold your palette knife or the spoon at the edge and start rotating your turntable, taking the palette knife inwards. It will get a very beautiful pattern on the top and the cake looks pretty. And as you can see, our mini triple flavored 3-tier cake is almost ready. I've garnished it only with some Lotus Biscoff biscuits because I didn't want to do anything for this one, but you can garnish it just like I showed before with Ferreros, mini chocolates, anything you want. Like, it's completely up to you. I am in love with this cake. This is so beautiful and makes any occasion so much special. It's just like any other cake. The only hack is getting the 3 consecutive sizes of the smallest cake tins possible. The tin sizes that I use and I've shown in the video give me a 1 kg cake, only 1 kg if I use whipped cream. But since ganache is heavier, the cake turns out to be 1.5 kgs in chocolate truffle. If you try it out, please let me know in the comment section how it turned out, and I would love if you share your pictures with me on Instagram. My handle is on the screen. If you like this video, please give it a like and share it with your family and friends. It would mean a lot to me if you would subscribe to my channel and press the notification button so that you never miss any video. I'll see you next time.